Common, Rare, Shatterfoil, Ultra Alt Art, Gold Rare, Plat Rare, Silver Rare, Secret Rare, Ultimate Rare, and Ghost Rare. It took me a moment, but finally, I have them all. I even have the most goated rarity of all, the MBT Rare. What is going on, guys? Rogue TCG here, bringing the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG deck profile. I hope you all are having a very happy Halloween. I know that I probably am. I am recording this in the future, of course. But today is Spooky Day, of course, and I'm going to bring up my favorite spooky deck of all time, and probably one of my favorite decks, period. I'm bringing today Phantom Knight again. I wanted to make a really in-depth Phantom Knight video talking about all the relevant ways to be playing Phantom Knight while also showing off my personal build of Phantom Knight. Now, this build is probably not the best build that you can be making with this deck. In my opinion, I have a lot of fun playing this deck, and this is a very fun deck. This build is probably not the best, and after I go over this profile, I will be talking about and showing you different things that you can do to increase your odds of winning with this strategy. But that is enough yapping out of the gate. Let's get started with the profile. Starting off our list, we are on Triple Tour Guide of the Underworld, being able to summon a level 3 Fiend out of deck, but we can't use it for a synchro. Good thing we're not synchroing. We can summon itself out of deck, but primarily we're going to be wanting to summon Graft, Malebranche of the Burning Abyss. And when this card is sent to, from the field to the graveyard, we're able to summon a Burning Abyss from deck, being Seer, Malebranche of the Burning Abyss. And when that card is sent from field to graveyard, we're able to bring back a Burning Abyss from our graveyard. Now, these don't actually have to just be sent from field to graveyard, they just have to be sent to graveyard in general. So they can still work with cards like Cherubini, even if we don't open Tour Guide. But this is our small Tour Guide package. Even if we use one Tour Guide and get both our Graph and our Seer throughout our combo, we can still use the other two Tour Guides. If we have another one, we can just summon the other Tour Guide out of deck and just keep going like that. But that's it for our little Tour Guide engine. Now let's get on to our Phantom Knights. We are on Triple Phantom Knights of Torn Scales. This card allows us on ignition to discard a card to send a Phantom Knight card from deck to graveyard. And then if this card is in the graveyard and a Phantom Knight card is banished from your graveyard, on a new chain, you are able to activate this card to special summon itself from the graveyard, but it's banished when it leaves the field. Now, of course, that does not that's not true when it's underneath an Xyz monster as an Xyz material. You'll still get sent to graveyard that way, so that way we can retain our Torn Scales for as long as we possibly can. We're also on triple copies of the Phantom Knights of Silent Boots. If we control another Phantom Knight monster, we're just able to summon out of hand once per turn. And if this card's in our graveyard, once per turn we can banish it from our graveyard to add a Phantom Knight spell trap from deck to hand. Really great way to trigger cards like our Torn Scales. We are also on one apiece of Phantom Knights of Ancient Cloak. This is a card that you can buff up to 2 if you would like to. I'm trying to run a lot of non-engine in this deck, so I'm opting not to. But if you find consistency to be an issue or grind games to be an issue, I would recommend buffing this up to 2. We're also on one copy of Phantom Knight of Stangreaves. It's kind of like a scuffed version of Phantom Knight's Silent Boots, although it does have its situations, so I am just playing the one copy of it because it is kind of like a utility tool. And then one copy of Phantom Knights of Ragged Gloves. Now these three all kind of are utility cards. While these two kind of perform a very similar duty, while this one performs something very different. Ancient Cloak we can banish up from the graveyard to add a The Phantom Knights card from deck to hand. Gloves can banish itself from graveyard in order to send a different Phantom Knight card from deck to graveyard, so it's kind of like a bridge in between cards. And then Stained Greaves, we can banish it from the graveyard to summon a Phantom Knight out of our hand. Or if this card's in our hand and a Phantom Knight is special to our board, we can activate the effect in hand in order to summon this guy to our board, and then we can opt to modulate its level to 4. Most of the time we are not going to be modulating the level, although if we have Shade Brigandine, it can be worth it to modulate that level. But that's all we are running for our main deck Phantom Knights. Since they are level 3 darks, they're very easy to get into the graveyard, especially given the aforementioned Cherubini and our Rusty Bardiche. It's pretty simple to get these guys in rotation. We're also on some extenders. We're on a triple Kagamucha Knight. We're on Tour Guide, and Kagamucha Knight and Tour Guide do go hand in hand, just because of how it works. Kagamucha Knight reads, when you normal summon a level 3 monster, you can activate this card from your hand to then immediately summon it. So how it works with Tour Guide is you normal summon the Tour Guide. Tour Guide's effect is on normal summon, so we go Chainlink 1 Tour Guide, and then we have the option to go Chainlink 2 Kagamucha Knight, chain blocking our Tour Guide so it cannot be Ash Blossomed or even something like Dominus Impulsed. They actually have to hit this instead of our Tour Guide, which is our real value generation tool. Now keep in mind that doesn't stop stuff like Infinite Impermanence or Effect Veiler, although, you know, we can't stop absolutely everything. We're also playing 3 Kagamucha Knight because even without Tour Guide, we can just normal summon anything, and then Kagamucha Knight is the extender that we need to again go into Cherubini. So that's why we are on 3 of that. We're also on 1 copy of Psychic Wielder. I'm on Wielder instead of Tracker because it has a secret rare. That's literally the only reason. I think Tracker is better than Wielder just because it isn't a tuner. But you know, without Halka Fibrex, Celine, like Sky Striker combos going on, it's not actually too relevant. We're also on the extenders for our Wielder, being 2 copies of Emergency Teleport to be able to fetch this out of deck. Now, in different variations of the Phantom Knight deck, you can play more of this card, and in some variations, it's actually way better to play more of this card. Although in this variation, I'm just playing 2, just because it's an extra copy of our Psychic Wielder and our other Psychic that's in our deck. It's also quick play, which is very based. For our Phantom Knight spell traps, we're on 1 Phantom Knight Rank Up Magic Force. We are on the Dark Requiem, because I personally just love that card so much. I think it's just very powerful. As well as triple copies of Phantom Knight's Fogblade. Funny thing, Phantom Knight actually just somehow has a really, really good matchup into Tenpai for some reason. I didn't really consider it, but if you end on a board that consists of like Cherubini or Rusty Bardiche or something, Cherubini's the best one though, and a singular Fogblade, when your opponent enters the battle phase, at the start step of the battle phase, you go Fogblade, target Cherubini. Your opponent now cannot attack the Cherubini anymore. They can't attack you directly, they just can't attack the Cherubini. And if this is your only monster, they just can't attack you, which means you're not dying. Because Tenpai needs to attack you to get their fucking ball rolling. And if they can't attack you, they can't really do too much. So, that's just the logic behind that. There are always going to be cards that out it, although it is a neat little combo in order to kind of like buy yourself a turn. We're also on 1 copy of Phantom Knights of Shade Brigandine as just a little extra extender. Could also get us a little bit easier access into 4s, as well as 1 copy of Phantom Knight's Wing. In my personal playing of Phantom Knight, I always find that it is useful to have 2 graveyard traps that can reborn Phantom Knights during your own turn. And Fogblade can reborn a Phantom Knight by banishing itself from the graveyard, and so can Wing. There's one other one that can do it, being Phantom Knight Sword, although I prefer Wing because it has a lingering effect on it, an effect that persists after it resolves, while Sword needs to stay on board and thus can be removed to remove the protection. But that's it for our Phantom Knight spells and traps. Now onto our utility spells. We're on 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army and 1 copy of Foolish Burial. Again, just really good cards in this deck. We're warrior-based deck, although funny enough in this deck, if we open Tour Guide, it is worth it to go Reinforcement of the Army in order to grab the Kagamucha Knight, which is just so funny to me. And then Foolish Burial, of course, is Foolish Burial. Send any card from deck to graveyard. The best card in the deck to be sending is either Torn Scales or Ancient Cloak. Whichever one you don't have in the graveyard, you want to send the other one, because those are the best 2 to have it paired up in the graveyard. Now for our hand traps and non-engine, but mostly hand traps. We are on 2 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, rocking 2 different arts because I like to piss off my opponents. This card is really good. This is a psychic monster, so this is our other E-Telly target. It also is one of the only Ghost Girls that can activate its effect on the field as well. as well as this card is really good into Centurion at the moment, and Centurion is really popping off right now, especially the Bestial version. And the Bestials do kind of hurt us quite a bit, so we're able to mitigate just a little bit by main decking 2 copies of Ghost Ogre. We are also on triple copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, of course, in order to stop cards like Fuelos. And then speaking of Fuelos, we are also on 3 copies of that card as well. Now, I know what you're saying. That's really expensive. Like, that's unreasonably expensive. Well, don't worry. We're also on 3 copies of Dominus Impulse as well. Of course, I'm going to say I do not think that you should pick up these cards if you want to play Phantom Knights. Like, not necessary in the slightest. These are really good meta cards at the moment and will win you games, especially Impulse and Fool. Like, these 2 cards are insane right now. But if you do not have the financial, benevolence in order to pick this up, I know that's not the correct word, I just couldn't really find something, I would recommend these other cards. Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion is fairly alright. It's being level 3 is also quite good. Same with Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill, as well as Infinite Impermanence. These 3 cards are pretty alright replacements for these. Another good option would also be the Bestials. Bestials are also quite good, although I would recommend siding those instead. Like, we can play Druisworm, Magnemite, and then Phantasme is also a really good one. There's a lot of really good options you can be playing instead of Impulse and Fuelos. Although I did want to just include them in my list because I, of course, want to make the list as good as I possibly can. Because, that's how Yu-Gi-Oh works, baby. And then lastly in our list, we only have 3 more cards. We're on 2 copies of Forbidden Droplet, incredibly powerful in this deck, since you can send traps, spells, and monsters in order to negate everything. And our traps and our monsters love being in the graveyard, so, huge W there, being able to, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, killing your opponent, and then also plussing, going +3 at the end of the day, real nice. And then lastly, 1 Called by the Grave to stop our opponent's hand traps. That's it for our main deck. Now onto our extra. In our extra deck, we are on 1 copy of Link Spider. We can link off our Shade Brigandine to make this, so it isn't the worst thing in the world. We're on 1 copy of Cherubini, Ebon Angel of the Burning Abyss. Keep in mind, if you are playing against this card sends a level 3 monster from your deck to the graveyard for cost. So keep that in mind. Cannot be Ash Blossomed. You can't even activate Ash Blossom against this card, so don't even try it. And it is not even remotely worth Effect Veiling or Imperming or Ghost Mournering or whatever. This card is always going to accomplish what it wants to do as long as it's staying on board. And it even has a built-in protection effect, so if you plan around it, you can even set a card before you make the Cherubini. So if you think your opponent has the ability to pop it, you are able to protect it by sending a back row to the graveyard instead, since it does have that protection effect. And it's even worth it because you can send a card like Phantom Knights of Fogblade that you set in your back row just in case to the graveyard, and that's just an extender from there. So, huge W's there. And then we're also on 1 Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy in order to keep extending further. This card's really good to be able to, utilize your opponent's resources in order to make your own Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche, since that card is very generic. We are on the Blowjob Brothers, of course. We're on 1 copy of IP Masquerena and 1 copy of Espina's Little Knight. They're very powerful in the meta, and I believe they're very powerful in this deck. They're both dark, of course. And they'll also allow us to get our Xyz monsters like Leviair, the Sea Dragon, off the field while utilizing them to their best, being able to send the cards that are underneath of it to the graveyard. And then we're on the 1 aforementioned copy of Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche. If this card resolves, you win the game. Also, if you are able to vote for which card you want Quarter Century Secret Rare, I voted for this card. I think this card deserves it because the highest rarity this card has is an ultra rare from the set it was released in. And then the next rarity is the shit ass gold secret, not even secret, the gold bordered card, the ass colored one. So Yeah, it'd be really nice if this had a QCR, although I am just a fiend for bling. And then last link is 1 copy of accessing the code Talker in order to remove sticky board states. It also benefits that Link Spider specifically is an Earth monster, so we get an extra attribute there if we went through Shade Brigandine. For XEs, we are on 2 copies of Phantom Knights of Break Sword, and then 2 copies of Levier the Sea Dragon. Break Sword is able to remove 2 cards, one on our opponent's field and one on ours, and if it's removed just like period, if it was XC summoned, we had to bring back 2 Phantom Knights from our graveyard. We're locked into Dark, and then their levels become 4, allowing us to either set up 3 monster negates or set up our opponent's immediate demise. And then we're on 2 Levier, because we are only on 1 cloak, and a lot of our Phantom Knights are banishing themselves for cost, and we don't really have a way to bring them back. This is our way to bring them back. This is our way to recycle our resources over and over and over again, and still get advantage out of it. Of course, you could always cut 1, but I would always recommend in Phantom Knight builds to at least run 1 Levier, or at least consider it, just because Levy is just so powerful in this deck, being able to recycle your resources nigh infinitely, because it is a soft once per turn. So you can use Levier twice per turn, like if you run 2, of course. And then lastly, I mentioned it before, we are on 1 copy of Dark Rebellion XYZ Dragon, 1 copy of Dark Requiem XYZ Dragon, 1 copy of Raider's Knight, and then 1 copy of Arc Rebellion XYZ Dragon. Now, Dark Rebellion does nothing. It doesn't do anything relevant. Dark Requiem, however, if it was made using Dark Rebellion underneath of it, it gains the effect where if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can detach a material, negate the effect, destroy the card, and if you destroyed the card, you're able to bring back an Xyz monster from your graveyard. That isn't a once per turn. That isn't even a once per chain. So yeah, this card is really good, and this is why even back in the day, I wouldn't even really consider Apollousa, because as easy it was to make Apollousa, it's also fairly easy to make this card. Because all you have to do is have 2 level 3s and a Rusty Bardiche on field, and you gain access to him immediately, which is what this deck is made to do. So, this card is very powerful. And then Arc Rebellion, it goes Raider's Knight to Arc Rebellion. This card can't be destroyed by card effects, so they have to run it over by battle, or send it to the graveyard or shuffle it back in a deck or something. And you can attach material from that card. And then after you activate the effect, if it has a Dark Xyz attached to it, it negates the effects of all monsters on field permanently. And then it gains the attack of all other monsters on field. The original attack, of course. However, that makes this card fucking huge. And sometimes if your opponent left a monster in attack position, they are just dead. And that is the idea. The idea is you want to utilize your not once per turn Break Sword popping effect, and your Rusty Bardiche popping effect, and your SP effect to banish cards. SP says you can't attack directly. Well, who cares if you can attack directly if Arc Rebellion can just punch over anything for 1 billion damage? You want to simplify the board state and then kill your opponent into the sun. But that's it for our extra deck. I did want to go over, before I go over some other things, I wanted to go over some alternative options that people would be able to play, because I wanted to make this video a little bit more in-depth. For our level 4 monsters, other level 4s you are able to play is Time Thief Redoer, being able to utilize our Shade Brigandine in order to make this card with a trap underneath of it, as well as Evil Swarm Nightmare to be able to flip down our opponent's cards. Another honorable mention, I don't have it exactly right here right now, is Evil Swarm Ophion. Very funny thing you can do with it is if you bring back a Phantom Knight Torn Scale from your graveyard using a trap, and then you use the bad Rank Up Magic card, Rank Up Magic Launch, the one that was banned previously. I say it's bad, but it was banned, so it can't be that bad. You are able to just make Ophion in Phantom Knight, which is very funny, and it can stop certain strategies like Yubel and Fiendsmith. It's pretty funny. But we also have the ability to play Typhon, because it is a dark, and it's just a way that we can do stuff. as well as our Utopic Draco Future package in order to utilize our Leviers. If you play 2 Leviers, you might want to lean closer into Utopic Draco Future, although I'm opting not to just because the attribute is a light and it doesn't really synergize too well with our Dominus Impulse. Those are our XCs that we have options to play. Of course, that isn't all of them. Those are the ones that immediately came to mind for me. Other cards that came to mind are for Link specifically is Silhouette Rabbit, like the new version of Verte Anaconda, Underworld Goddess of the Closed World in order to really be able to remove problematic threats, and Nightmare Unicorn if you were priced out by SP Little Knight, although you shouldn't be for the in a little bit because it is getting a very, very open reprint in the next, I don't know if it's called Rarity Collection or anything anymore, but in the next like set or whatever, SP is getting reprinted, so you shouldn't have to rely on Unicorn for too long, but until then, Unicorn is still very powerful in this deck. Other strategies that we are able to combine with our Phantom Knights is what I want to talk about next. And I think the most relevant right now really is going to be our Horus engine. Pretty much one triple Inseti, one Happy, and triple King Sark, although you can include like one other Horus monster. This is pretty much what the engine looks like. And there isn't really too much change to the main deck too. The only real change is probably the removal of either Tour Guide or some of our non-engine like Fularos and Dominus Impulse. But this version of the deck gives us a little bit more immediate power with the Horuses as well as discarding ability, and might incentivize us to max more out on the Phantom Knights. For example, playing like 2 to 3 copies of Cloak, 2 copies of Glove, something along that line. But this is one direction you can take the deck, of course. I'm just going to leave this up here just as a little reminder that's a way we can play the deck. Another way we are able to play the deck is if you saw my last Phantom Knight deck profile, we are able to play it using the Fiendsmiths, using the Phantom Knights as basically extra material, as well as being able to set up a Desiree on our side of the field, giving Phantom Knight a different form of interaction, being non-targeting, negation of things that aren't just monsters, allowing the deck to play around stuff like Evenly Matched, or even stuff like Dark Ruler No More. So these cards are really powerful in the deck, although again, if you're priced out by them, do not think that this is the only thing that you have available to you, because even though my deck is very high rarity, it doesn't mean the deck itself is necessarily all too expensive if you want to buy it in the low rarity. Also, I believe this is the last engine that I really wanted to focus too much about on like competitive aspect, is the Adventure engine. The Adventure engine is very good in Phantom Knight, and it was very good a while back, and I'm very confused on why the Adventure engine like fell off, or I guess falling off is kind of like a hard term to say. Like, it's not as popular anymore, and it's not like it's not powerful. You get a bounce and you still get the Omni and you still get like the extenders, but it just seems like it's missing something now. But we do have the ability to play the Adventure engine. It's a lot cheaper than it was before. It gives us, again, access to an Omni, very similar to the Fiendsmith engine. However, this is an Omni upon activation, so it can't stop stuff like Dark Ruler, really, while the Fiendsmith stuff can. So it's kind of like a pick and choose. Also, this takes a lot more of the main deck space, while the Fiendsmith engine takes a lot more of the extra deck space. So it's kind of like an option that you have to pick, as well as the restriction on no normal summon effect means that you cannot play Tour Guide with this deck. If you are playing this version, I do not recommend playing Tour Guide. You can still play Grafin Seer as a way to send off of Cherubini to just get into an easy Bardiche. Although, other cards that I'd recommend replacing the Tour Guide engine with would be cards like Junk Forward, or these two cards, the Danger Jackalope and Danger Tsuchinoko. And then the last card that I wanted to mention before I ended this video off was going to be a copy of Triple Tactics Talents. If you wanted to play around with that, Tactics is very powerful in this deck, so you are able to do that as well. Before I ended the video off though, I did just want to mention this. We are slowly gaining subscribers. We are currently at about 1,140. That took me a moment to say. But I did want to say, once we get to 5,000 subscribers, I know it's a little bit away. You see this mat back here? I have another one. And both this mat back here and this mat over here, I'm going to be giving away. So once we get to 5,000 subscribers, I'm going to be doing a giveaway for these two mats, as well as, so there's going to be two winners. First place winner is going to be randomly generated. All you have to do to join it is to subscribe and leave a comment, or join the Discord, and I'm going to have a channel there where you're able to leave a comment. Although I would recommend just waiting a little bit until we get a little bit further number-wise. But first place is going to get a mat plus an entire Orchist core. So they're going to get the whole Orchist core. Like, you know, Dingirsu, Girsu, Harpor, Nightmare, Galatea, Babel, you know, the whole shindig. And then second place is, and the mat. And then second place is just going to get the mat. So there are going to be two mats being given away. And then first place is going to get the full Orchist core. But that's going to be about it for the video. Thank you to my one member. Thank you, Ari. If you want to become a member, I would recommend checking out the end of my videos, where I go a little bit more in depth about that. But that's going to be all for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a very spooky Halloween. Bye-bye. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh and the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga Supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or two before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.